Estás entrando en Crónicas de la Oscuridad. En este reino nocturno, las sombras escriben historias prohibidas, relatos tan perturbadores que desafían toda lógica. Cada crónica es un viaje sin retorno hacia lo más profundo y oscuro del alma humana, donde los miedos más íntimos cobran vida y se materializan en terrores indescriptibles. El silencio aquí no es aliado, sino cómplice, susurrando secretos que ningún mortal debería escuchar jamás. Permanece atento, pues las historias que escucharás quedarán tatuadas en tu memoria y acecharán tus sueños durante mucho tiempo después. The genesis was sound. Whispers, indistinct yet undeniable, echoing from the spare chamber at the dead hour of 2, whilst I resided in solitary possession of the house. What my ears perceived that night, and the subsequent chain of events, remain indelibly etched. Recounting this chronicle necessitates unflinching fidelity to the sequence, however improbable it may appear. 6 months prior, the dissolution of my marriage had propelled me, Arthur Finch, into this colonial edifice on Sycamore Lane. 4 bedchambers, a pair of baths, an absurd expanse for a solitary man, yet rendered affordable by the recent market collapse. The guest room remained a void, sparsely furnished with a bedstead, a bureau, and several cartons containing remnants of Eleanor's life. Relics she had yet to reclaim. It transpired on an October Tuesday, deep into the night. Mired in the flickering inanity of televised comedies, the sound infiltrated my consciousness. Voices emanating from the upper floor, initially dismissed as the television's drone, the illusion shattered when I silenced the set. They persisted. 2, perhaps 3 individuals in colloquy. Not the words themselves, but the cadence, the rhythm of conversation was unmistakable, seeping from the guest room. A visceral tremor seized me. My heart hammered against my ribs, a cold dew forming on my brow. Motionless upon the sofa, I strained my senses. The murmurs ebbed and flowed, possessed of a disquieting normalcy, yet muffled, as if filtered through plaster and lath. From its resting place beside my bed, I retrieved the ash bat, its familiar heft a scant comfort against the tremor in my hands. Each step upon the old staircase elicited a groan from the timbers. Ascending into the gloom, the voices gained a marginal clarity, though the specific words remained elusive. Their tone was eerily placid, conversational, utterly incongruous with the hour and the sealed confines of my home. Shadow dominated the upper landing. I eschewed the light switch. The source was confirmed, behind the guest room portal. Pressing my ear to the cool wood, I held my breath, seeking intelligibility. Faint fragments reached me. Cannot persist in this. A weary masculine tone. Imperative. A woman, urgency threading her voice. Unjust toward another man, perhaps older. My fingers, unsteady, closed around the brass knob. I rotated it with deliberate slowness, praying for silence. It resisted. Locked. A paralysis gripped me. That door was never secured. Indeed, it lacked a key, lost by previous occupants the estate agent had mentioned. Yet the mechanism was utterly immovable. I applied greater force. Futile. The door remained resolutely barred, and within, the voices ceased, instantaneously. Is anyone present? My voice fractured. Who occupies this room? Only stillness answered. I struck the panel sharply. I hear you. Depart from my house now, or I summon the authorities. The silence deepened, absolute and profound. Retreating downstairs, I snatched the telephone, dialing the emergency line. 2 patrol vehicles materialized swiftly, their lights extinguished for stealth. While I waited on the dew-damp lawn, the officers conducted a thorough sweep. Their findings were null. No breach of entry. Every window secured from within. The guest room door, they reported, yielded readily to their touch. "Are you quite certain about the voices, Mr. Finch?" inquired the senior constable, his torch beam dissecting the vacant room. The mind can conjure illusions late at night. I possessed certainty regarding my senses, certainty regarding the locked state of that door. Yet I merely inclined my head, murmuring thanks. What recourse remained? They departed into the night. Sleep became an elusive quarry that night, and for many ensuing nights, I fortified the house, an electronic surveillance network, cameras vigilantly guarding each ingress, tumblers replaced in every lock. Measures ultimately proved impotent. A week hence, at the bleaker hour of 3, the voices returned. The familiar muffled discourse from the guest room. The same inexplicable barrier of a locked door possessing no key. This time I captured the phenomenon on my phone's recorder. Yet playback yielded only a hiss of empty static. The occurrences became periodic, nightly intrusions soon evolving into a near constant presence. Always nocturnal. Always the trio engaged in seemingly mundane dialogue, forever just beyond comprehension. Always the door, locked against entry. My nights migrated to the downstairs sofa, my solace increasingly sought in spirits from a bottle. The notion of selling arose only to founder on the absurdity of disclosure. Who would credit such a tale? My own belief wavered. Then, the nature of the haunting shifted. One December eve, amidst the familiar drone, a new sound arose. Weeping. A profound, soul-wrenching grief, seemingly emanating from the female voice. The male tones acquired a sharper edge, laced with anger. I remained rooted at the stairwell's base, the bat clutched tight, immobilized by dread as the sobbing intensified. A sudden crash reverberated from within the room, the impact of significant weight. More weeping followed. Galvanized, I surged upstairs, seizing the knob. Still locked. "Cease this!" I roared, hammering the wood. "Leave her be!" The lamentation cut off abruptly. Silence descended once more. Then, footsteps. Unmistakably clear, traversing the floorboards within, approaching the door. Measured, deliberate. I recoiled, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. The steps halted directly opposite me. I could discern breathing, shallow, proximate, separated from me only by the flimsy barrier of painted wood. Down the stairs I fled, bursting through the front door into the frigid night air, seeking refuge in my automobile. I drove until the town dissolved behind me, finding anonymity in a roadside motel where I remained sequestered for 2 days. Upon my eventual return, apprehension warred with necessity. The guest room presented its usual placid facade. No evidence of the violent crash I had witnessed orally. The door swung inward without protest. I meticulously inspected every carton, shifted the meager furnishings, scrutinized each plank and plaster surface. All appeared undisturbed, yet something was altered. An addition that sent icy tendrils coiling around my spine. Etched into the door's interior face, roughly at eye level, were 3 deep parallel gouges in the timber. They had not been there previously. My desperation sought solace in ritual. I summoned Father Dominic, who perambulated through the house, asperging holy water, murmuring blessings. He perceived no definitive malignancy, he stated, but offered prayers. The voices persisted. Next, I enlisted Madame Evangeline, a psychic practitioner, arriving with an arsenal of crystals and smoldering sage. Hours she spent traversing the rooms before pronouncing the presence of multiple energies, insistent yet not inherently hostile. The voices persisted. Finally, I consulted Dr. Anya Sharma, a psychiatrist. She prescribed medication to quell anxiety, gently proposing the possibility of auditory hallucinations born of stress. The voices persisted. Winter relinquished its grip to a hesitant spring. The voices, once terrifying, evolved into unwelcome spectral cohabitants. A strange acclimatization occurred. I ceased recoiling at their onset. I began maintaining a meticulous journal, documenting their appearances, striving to decipher fragments. Patterns surfaced. Their activity confined to the hours between 1 and 4 in the morning, predominantly on weeknights. The woman's name, caught in fleeting whispers, sounded like Clara. One of the men possessed a distinctive, intermittent cough. They remained oblivious to my shouts, my pleas, my very existence outside their sealed domain. The door maintained its spectral sentience, locked during their discourse, unlocked upon their cessation. Then arrived the night that fractured the uneasy truce. April the 15th, a date seared into memory by the preceding ordeal of tax preparation. The voices commenced around 2:30, but transformed. No longer muffled conversation, but raw, unrestrained fury. All three clamoring simultaneously, the unmistakable sound of objects shattering. The woman's voice, piercing through the cacophony, screamed, "No, please, don't!" Bat in hand, I charged the stairs, prepared this time to breach the threshold by force. Her screams escalated. A man bellowed, "You invited this fate!" More splintering crashes. I swung the bat, impacting the door with savage force. Wood groaned and cracked but remained intact. Again I struck, and again. The tumult within seemed to swell in response, feeding on my assault. A final desperate blow and the door flew inward, torn from its frame. The room beyond was void, utterly vacant. No combatants, no debris, nothing disturbed. Yet an unnatural chill permeated the space, so profound my exhalations plumed white in the air. The window remained shut, latched. My gaze fell upon the floorboards. Liquid. A small pool, glistening darkly near the room's center, was steadily expanding. As I watched, transfixed, its circumference widened. The fluid was viscous, opaque. Tentatively, I touched its edge. Blood. I staggered back, horrified. The pool continued its impossible seep, spreading relentlessly. The temperature plummeted further. The sanguine tide reached the splintered doorway where I stood trembling. And then a sound, intimate and chilling, breathed directly beside my ear. The woman's voice, perfectly lucid for the first time. "Help us." Once more, I fled. That night was spent huddled in my car within the sterile sanctuary of a superstore parking lot. Returning the following day, braced for the gruesome tableau, I found nothing. The blood had vanished without a trace. Since that night, 3 days ago, the voices have remained silent. The guest room door stands perpetually unlocked. The room itself is merely empty space. Yet the atmosphere within the house has altered. A palpable weight, a sense of imminence pervades the stillness, as if the unseen occupants are merely holding their breath, observing, waiting. Yesterday yielded a discovery. Driven by a gnawing unease, I delved into archived local newspapers, hunting for any mention of this address. An article dated 1985 surfaced. It chronicled the disappearance of a woman named Clara Vance following a reported altercation with her husband and his brother within these very walls. Her remains were never located. The men maintained she had absconded. Authorities investigated, but charges were never filed. Accompanying the text was a photograph of the house, identical to its present state save for one detail. The guest room window was depicted shattered. The caption attributed the damage to Clara's purported abrupt departure. Later that same day, whilst finally sorting through the last of Eleanor's stored possessions, I unearthed a forgotten family album. Idly turning the stiff pages, my eye caught a photograph of Eleanor's grandmother as a young woman. Beneath the faded image, a handwritten name: Clara Vance. They have returned. Even as I commit these words to paper, their voices drift down from the upper floor, possessed of a newfound clarity. They are uttering my name: Arthur. The guest room door, I know without checking, is once again sealed fast. But this time, my course is set. I am ascending those stairs. This time, my companion is not a baseball bat, but a sledgehammer procured this afternoon. What awaits me beyond that barrier remains unknown, yet resolution hardens my fear. Clara Vance merits justice. Eleanor's grandmother deserves repose. And I, Arthur Finch, demand illumination. Should this account be discovered and its author unaccounted for, your search need extend no further than the guest room. Behind the door that locks itself without a key, attend closely, you may hear the voices still. The first whisper of the shutter, almost lost beneath the sigh of waves and the cry of gulls, carried no malice. By the 100th insistent click, however, I understood it as the percussion of danger. What began as a sun-drenched surrender on a quiet shore morphed into a harrowing pursuit, a shadow play orchestrated by a stranger who anticipated my every turn. I'd never conceived that a simple coastal escape, a balm for a city-frayed soul, could unravel into a nightmare, leaving me adrift in a sea of fractured sanity and perpetual unease. My name is Ilara. For months, the promise of this seaside respite had been a distant lighthouse beam guiding me through the fog of late nights and demanding cases. A barrister tethered to the relentless pace of urban life, I rarely surfaced for air, but persuasive friends had finally anchored me to a week's leave in a sleepy littoral town. The initial days unfolded like a dream, languid mornings tangled in sheets, afternoons dissolving into novels read against the backdrop of murmuring tides, evenings painted by sunsets viewed through the amber lens of a wine glass. It was the fourth day when the rhythm stuttered. I lay sprawled on my towel, absorbing the sun's generous warmth, a drowsy peace settling over me. Then came the sound, sharp and metallic. A camera's eye blinking open and shut. My own eyes opened. I scanned the expanse of sand, the scatter of beachgoers, and found him, a man lowering a substantial camera. Average build, nondescript in khaki shorts and a muted green polo, the very picture of a tourist. Nothing outwardly alarming. Yet, as his gaze snagged mine across the intervening space, an inexplicable coldness, alien to the humid air, slithered down my spine. An intensity burned in his look, unsettling me instantly. He offered a smile, a brief sterile curve of the lips that never reached his eyes, before turning, melting back into the anonymous seaside drift. I tried to banish the disquiet. People take pictures, beach scenes, nothing personal. The internal reassurance felt thin, unconvincing. Abruptly, the sun felt less benign, the sand less welcoming. I gathered my belongings, retreating to the rented cottage far earlier than planned. The following day, seeking refuge in activity, I ventured into the town's quaint embrace. Browsing the artisan shops lining the main thoroughfare, I caught it. A flicker of familiar green reflected in a pane of glass. My pulse leaped. I spun around, but the pavement behind me teemed with slow-moving tourists. If he'd been there, he was swallowed by the crowd. Seeking sanctuary, I slipped into a small cafe. The aroma of roasted coffee a temporary shield. Nursing a latte, I marshaled arguments against my burgeoning fear. Paranoia. Seeing ghosts in the sunlight. This is relaxation, not reconnaissance. Yet an hour later, emerging from the cafe's calm, I saw him again. Positioned directly across the street, unambiguous. His camera was raised, lens aimed squarely at me. The shutter clicked, an audible punctuation mark. He lowered the device, that same chillingly vacant smile affixed to his face. I fled back to the cottage, hands trembling as the key grated in the lock, the deadbolt sliding home with a definitive thud. Coincidence was no longer a plausible defense. He was following me, photographing me. The reason remained terrifyingly obscure. Sleep that night was a fragmented, restless affair. Every rustle of leaves outside, every creak of the old cottage timbers sounded like his approach. By dawn I was frayed, coiled tight with suspicion. The beach was unthinkable. Instead, I drove inland, towards the green solace of a hiking trail etched into the coastal hills. Escape. Clarity. That was the goal. And for a time, the physical exertion, the cathedral quiet of the woods, the sheer indifference of nature worked their magic, soothing the raw edges of my nerves. For precious hours, the man and his lens faded. Then, rounding a sharp bend, the path opening onto a scenic overlook, my breath hitched. There he stood, perhaps 100 yards distant, perched on the rocky outcrop, camera leveled directly at my position. I froze, a surge of adrenaline flooding my system, hot and sickening. Impossible. How could he know? How had he bypassed me on the trail? He lowered the camera, that awful smile preceding him as he began walking purposefully towards me. Thought dissolved into instinct. I turned and ran. The trail became a blurred tunnel of green and brown, branches lashing at my face, my lungs screaming for air. Behind me, his footsteps, not frantic like mine but steady, measured, imbued with the unnerving certainty of eventual capture. I erupted from the tree line into the sun-drenched parking lot, fumbling desperately for my car keys. As the engine caught and I threw the car into reverse, I saw him emerge from the woods, camera still in hand, that cold, empty smile unwavering. I drove with numb precision straight to the local constabulary. My voice shook as I relayed the sequence of events to the officer behind the desk. He listened with practiced patience, but skepticism clouded his gaze. "Ma'am," he began, his tone gentle but dismissive. "Taking photos in public isn't illegal. Has he threatened you? Made any contact?" Without that, his hands were tied. I left the station feeling utterly exposed, the weight of disbelief heavier than my fear. It sounded thin, I knew, a tourist spooked by a camera, but a primal certainty resonated deep within me. This man, this Silas, intended harm. Back in the supposed safety of the cottage, I became a warden of my own small prison, checking locks, drawing curtains against the peering dusk. Needing connection, I called Maya, my closest friend. As the story tumbled out, her voice sharpened with alarm. "Ilara, leave!" she insisted, her tone cutting through my paralysis. "This isn't right. Come home. Get on the first flight." Agreement flooded me with relief, the thought of the city's familiar chaos suddenly representing sanctuary. I booked a flight for the morning, the task of packing a welcome distraction. Night descended, amplifying the cottage's isolation. Shadows pooled in corners, imbued with menace. Every settling groan of the structure was a potential footfall. Television offered no escape. The flickering images couldn't hold my fractured attention. Then, near midnight, I heard it. Distinct, chillingly close. A soft click. The sound of a camera shutter emanating from just outside my bedroom window. Ice water seemed to replace the blood in my veins. Heart hammering against my ribs. A frantic drumbeat he must surely hear. I crept towards the window. Millimeter by millimeter, I edged the curtain aside. He was there, standing shrouded in the deeper darkness beneath the trees bordering the property. As I watched, paralyzed by terror, he raised his camera. Another picture. The brief flare of the flash illuminated his face, and that cold, persistent smile. I recoiled from the window, snatching my phone, fingers fumbling with the emergency number. But a new sound sliced through my panic, freezing me mid-dial. The slow, deliberate rotation of a key in the front door lock. A key? How? Had he been inside already? My mind fractured, racing through horrifying scenarios as the faint sound of the door opening, then closing softly, reached me. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, unhurried, methodical, drawing nearer. My gaze darted wildly, searching for a weapon. A heavy ceramic table lamp. I yanked the plug from the wall, its weight a solid, desperate comfort in my grip. Positioning myself beside the bedroom door, I held my breath, every sinew taut. The footsteps paused directly outside. Silence stretched, thick with dread. Slowly the doorknob began to turn. As the door swung inward, I swung the lamp with every ounce of strength I possessed. A sickening thud reverberated, followed by a sharp cry of pain. I didn't pause to assess. I bolted, scrambling past the figure crumpled in the doorway, adrenaline propelling me towards the front door. Behind me, sounds of recovery, the quickening rhythm of pursuit. I burst into the cool night air, feet sinking into the sand, slowing my flight. Instinctively, I angled towards the distant lights of the town, praying for witnesses, for help. Reaching the boardwalk, the relative brightness felt like a shield. I risked a glance over my shoulder. He was there, 50 feet back perhaps, camera bouncing against his chest as he ran. And in that moment, under the sickly yellow sodium lamps, I saw his face clearly, truly, for the first time. Recognition struck like a physical blow. He wasn't a stranger. He was Silas Thorne. A man whose future I had helped extinguish in a courtroom 5 years prior when I was a junior prosecutor. A man who had spat a vow of vengeance as the bailiffs led him away. This wasn't random. It was retribution. He had hunted me, tracked me to this vulnerable place, meticulously orchestrated this terror. I forced my leaden legs to move faster, lungs burning, the sound of shouts rising from startled onlookers on the boardwalk. Then, a miracle. The rising, falling wail of a police siren. Silas must have heard it too. A guttural curse ripped through the night air behind me. His footsteps faltered. When I dared look back again, he had vanished, swallowed by the deep shadows between the beachfront buildings. A police cruiser skidded to a halt beside me, an officer leaping out, hand hovering near his weapon. "Ma'am? Are you okay?" The adrenaline fled, leaving me boneless. I collapsed onto the wooden planks, gasping out the whole story between ragged breaths. The photos, the relentless stalking, the break-in, and finally, his identity. They found Silas Thorne an hour later, attempting to board a late-night bus out of town. His camera held a chilling digital diary. Hundreds of images of me, lounging on the sand, browsing in shops, glimpsed through the cottage windows. They also discovered meticulously detailed notes chronicling my movements, and more disturbingly, a small collection of personal trinkets, items that could only have originated from my apartment miles away in the city. He'd been paroled 6 months ago, I learned later. 6 months spent incubating his hatred, observing my life from the periphery, waiting for the opportune moment. My vacation, my attempt at peace, had inadvertently provided it. I pressed charges, stalking, breaking, and entering, terroristic threats. But even as they guided Silas, cuffed and subdued, into the back of the police car, the look he shot me across the distance held no defeat. It held a promise. This was merely an interruption. The next day, I flew back to the city's embrace, but the feeling of being watched clung to me like the damp sea air. Every camera click on a busy street, every unexpected flash of light sent jolts of panic through me. My apartment became a fortress equipped with the latest security technology. Therapy sessions became a regular fixture, chipping away at the anxiety, the ingrained paranoia. Months have bled into one another. Logically, I understand I am safe. Silas Thorne resides behind bars again, facing a significantly longer sentence. Yet sometimes, walking through the anonymous urban throng, or lying awake in the pre-dawn stillness, I hear it, or imagine I do, the faint phantom click of a camera shutter. And I am left to wonder if the lens, once turned upon you, ever truly looks away. If safety, once fractured, can ever truly be whole again. "15 feet the scoring climbed the bark, raw wounds against the ancient grain. My fingers, unsteady, traced the grooves, each wide enough to swallow 3 digits whole. No bear clawed like this, no denizen I'd known across 2 decades rambling these peaks. The wood beneath my touch was pale, freshly violated, stark in the torchlight's glare. And the hairs prickled along my nape, remembering twin coals of red light hanging impossibly high, mere minutes past, suspended in the breathing dark. Perhaps the tale unfolds better from its inception. Silas Thorne, that's the name I answered to. Solitary nocturnal journeys through the Sierras have been my solace, my ritual for the greater part of my life. There's a particular tranquility woven into the starlit trails. Once the daytime throngs disperse, when the woods themselves seem to draw slow, deep breaths. Madness to some, I know, venturing alone into the night's embrace. Yet the wilderness always felt more like home than any city's clamor. Until that night. My vehicle rested at the Whispering Pines trailhead by 8, dusk bleeding the last warmth from the sky. Early autumn air, crisp but not yet biting, and a generous 3/4 moon ascending the ridgeline. Ideal auspices for a night's traverse. My pack held little: water, nuts, and dried fruit, my trusty trekking poles, the standard LED headlamp, and a backup torch. Clear skies were promised till dawn. For 2 hours, the forest offered precisely the communion I sought. Argent moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting shifting mosaics on the path. Distant owls traded questions across the valleys. The soft crunch of my boots on the trail was the only sound tethering me to my own passage as I pushed deeper, past the turnoff for Summit Lake, threading through colonnades of sentinel pines whose immense trunks rose like pillars guarding secrets. Around 10:30, I paused at a favored haunt, a moss-furred log beside a gurgling streamlet. I doused my headlamp, allowing my vision to drink in the moon-washed scene. Water whispered its ceaseless secrets over stones. Far above, a breeze stirred the highest boughs. This was my sanctuary. The city's tensions dissolved like mist as I sat, chewing slowly, absorbing the forest's nocturnal pulse. Then it came. A violent crack splintering the quiet, like a substantial limb snapping under immense weight, perhaps 50 yards upslope to my right. My hand, mid-journey to my mouth, froze. I've catalogued countless forest night sounds, deer rustling, wind-dropped branches, but this resonated differently. Heavier, laden with intent. Another crack followed, nearer. Something of considerable mass moved on a path parallel to mine, closing the distance. My headlamp flared back to life, its beam slashing through the undergrowth. The light snagged only on familiar trunks and the fronds of ferns. Yet the movement persisted, punctuated now by the sharp retort of breaking wood and a new cadence. A wet, rhythmic aspiration. the sound of colossal lungs working. Every instinct shrieked for flight, but I mastered the impulse, steadied my own breathing. Give large fauna space, avoid triggering pursuit, the wilderness creed. I'd met bears before. Likely just a bear, though nocturnal wandering wasn't their typical habit. The labored breaths amplified, drew closer. I heard the distinct crush of vegetation yielding. My beam darted, a nervous insect seeking motion between the trees. And then I saw them. Twin embers ignited by my light, floating a dozen feet clear of the forest floor. My reason faltered, unable to reconcile the image. Bears don't stand so tall. Cougars keep low. Nothing known walks that high among the trees. The embers blinked. The huffing ceased. Silence descended, absolute save for the frantic drumming within my ribs. Then, the lights moved. Not advancing but ascending. A smooth vertical glide until they hovered easily 15 feet aloft. A silhouette deeper than the night occluded the stars behind it, yet its precise form remained elusive, my beam seeming to slither across its surface, finding no purchase. A guttural noise escaped my throat, a primitive utterance of pure animal dread. The red eyes snapped, locking onto me with burning intensity. It surged into motion, swift and fluid, not toward me but mirroring my trail once more, pouring itself between the trees with an impossible newfound silence. All the while, those eyes remained fixed, incandescent points in the gloom. I registered glimpses of elongated limbs, too many limbs, moving with an eerie liquid grace. My paralyses shattered. Snatching my pack and poles, I began walking swiftly down the path, battling the primal urge to sprint. The eyes paced me, a constant presence flickering through the trees. Periodically they would elevate, then subside, as if the entity flowed up and down the trunks like sap. Yet, never a footfall, never a rustle. After 100 yards of this terrifying promenade, the eyes abruptly soared straight up, higher than before. Then, they simply winked out, extinguished as if by a switch. I stood riveted, straining my ears against the sudden void. Nothing. The woods had fallen utterly mute. No owls called, no breeze sighed, no unseen scurrying broke the stillness. Only the thunder of my own blood pounding in my ears remained. My trembling hand located the backup torch. I thumbed it on, casting its more potent beam into the trees where the presence had last manifested. The light illuminated only familiar forest. I swept it back and forth, searching. That's when the marks assaulted my vision. Starting 4 feet up the bole of a titanic fir, 4 parallel gouges, each the breadth of my hand, clawed violently upward through the bark. They continued, ascending, far beyond any natural reach, 15 feet, easily. The exposed wood gleamed pale, utterly fresh. These marks were moments old. More scars adorned the next tree, and the one beyond, a clear trail of immense violation leading up the slope, chronicling the creature's passage. In places, the gouges wrapped entirely around the trunk, suggesting a thing that could flow around timber as it climbed. I had to understand. Foolish, perhaps lethally so, but the need to comprehend gnawed at me. I left the trail, tracing the line of violated trees upward. My lights picked out further details, patches where the forest floor was flensed bare, leaving parallel furrows in the loam. Fractured branches dangled overhead, some thick as my thigh, snapped like twigs. The path of destruction culminated in a small secluded clearing. What lay there fractured my understanding of the world I thought I knew. The earth was patterned with deep impressions, not footprints, but smooth concavities pressed into the soil, as if something incredibly ponderous and fluid had flowed across it. They led to the base of the most colossal tree I'd ever encountered here, an ancient cedar, its trunk wider than my truck. Here the claw marks differed. They spiraled upward, wrapping the trunk again and again, reaching into darkness beyond the penetration of my lights. But it was the debris at the tree's base that arrested me completely. Scattered across the ground lay dozens of what seemed to be shed scales, varying in size from my palm to larger than dinner plates. They were thin as parchment, yet possessed the unyielding hardness of steel. Lifting one, I saw its surface was an iridescent black, shot through with intricate patterns that seemed to writhe and shift in my torchlight. Their edges were honed to a razor's sharpness. That's when the huffing returned, resonant, from somewhere high above in the unseen canopy. I dropped the scale as if burned and fled. To claim a controlled retreat would be falsehood. I crashed through underbrush, stumbled blindly down the slope, my lights flailing like panicked birds. Behind and above, something vast moved through the treetops. Breaking branches rained down around me. Those burning eyes flared and vanished between the trees, always higher now, herding me back toward the trail. I struck the main path hard, nearly sprawling. Without pause, I turned downhill and ran. Fitness is my ally, but terror lent me wings I never knew I possessed. The 3 miles back to the trailhead evaporated in what felt like moments, though my watch later recounted nearly an hour's passage. The entire flight I felt those eyes, a palpable weight watching from the darkness above. Yet they never drew nearer, never descended to intercept. Just observed. My frantic sprint ceased only when I burst into the gravel lot. Fumbling for keys, heart hammering against my ribs, I cast one final look back. There, poised at the very edge of my headlamp's illumination, floated 2 points of red light. They hung 30 feet above the ground. As I watched, transfixed, they ascended smoothly, impossibly higher, until they dissolved into the star-dusted blackness above the tree line. A moment later, a sound rolled down the valley, not precisely a roar, nor quite a scream, but some harrowing fusion of the two. It reverberated off the mountain faces, making the windows of my truck hum. Then, silence reclaimed the night. I disregarded several speed limits on the journey home. Hours were lost to the digital glow of my screen, searching for correlating accounts, any echo of my encounter. Nothing matched the specifics. The closest parallels lay buried in fragments of indigenous lore, tales of a being called the Skywalker, or sometimes the Bark Render, a presence said to traverse the high canopy after dark, marking its domain with impossibly high clawings. The legend spoke of its ancientness, its intelligence, its fierce territoriality, yet they also whispered it rarely troubled humans who offered no direct threat. 3 times since, I have walked that trail again, always under the unambiguous light of day. The scars remain etched into the trees, slowly weathering. I've found more of the strange obsidian scales, discovered areas where the upper canopy is fractured and twisted, as if by the passage of something immense. But the eyes have not returned. Sometimes, lying awake in the quiet hours, I ponder if the entity sensed a kinship, another solitary nightwalker, one who revered its sylvan realm. Perhaps that recognition spared me. Or perhaps it was merely asserting its dominion, warning me away from its nocturnal hunting grounds. I still seek the solace of the woods by night, sometimes, but never alone, and never on that trail. The forest feels altered now, larger, older, steeped in mysteries we have long forgotten, or perhaps chosen to ignore. You comprehend that peculiar tremor, don't you? When the asphalt unwinding beneath your wheels is a path etched into memory, yet suddenly, it's alien. The familiar sentinels of pine and oak loom unnaturally vast. The lane itself constricts, and the very heavens seem to descend, a leaden weight pressing down, seeding disquiet in your gut. Precisely that sensation ambushed me, a psychic ripple foretelling the night's unraveling. It was as if the world, our steadfast, predictable world, had subtly tilted on its axis, just enough to inject doubt to make you question the reality beneath your feet. I departed Elias's place, the warmth of a shared late meal fading behind me, opting for the sylvan passage home, a route tracing through deep rural stretches. A pilgrimage undertaken countless times, this old artery carved through dense timberland, typically a haven of nocturnal peace, deserted. I cherished its seclusion, the way interlocking branches formed a verdant nave overhead, transforming the drive into a passage through a living tunnel. The rhythmic crunch of displaced gravel beneath the tires had always been a balm. But this night, the familiar harmony was fractured. Past 11, the lane lay shrouded in a blackness deeper than recollection allowed. My headlamps felt enfeebled, their beams clawing only a few scant feet into the gloom, while the arboreal walls on either flank crowded in, unnervingly intimate. A thick cataract of cloud had swallowed the moon whole, and bereft of its silvering grace, the darkness outside the car achieved a palpable density, an almost suffocating presence. Deeper into the woods I plunged, and a strangeness began to percolate. This road, usually peppered with the occasional time-worn farmhouse, a weathered mailbox standing sentinel, was utterly barren. No structures, no markers, no flicker of domesticity. Only trees, an endless repeating motif on both sides. A belated awareness surfaced. 30 minutes had bled away without the passing gleam of another vehicle. Ordinarily, even at this hour, one or two spectral pairs of headlights would ghost by. Unease, a cold vine, began its insidious climb. I reached for the radio, seeking refuge in sound, but only a blizzard of static answered. My fingers danced across the dial, chasing elusive frequencies, finding none. It was then my gaze fell upon my phone, inert on the passenger seat, no service. And precisely then, the road contorted. I hadn't anticipated it. This path, I knew it. It ran straight, an unwavering line for miles before yielding to a gentle arc. This, however, was a sharp, almost violent wrench in the landscape. A startled flutter in my chest as I spun the wheel, the headlights slicing across the constricted tarmac. My knuckles shone white against the steering wheel's dark curve. How could this have escaped my notice on every prior journey? I eased off the accelerator, attempting to dispel the mounting conviction that I'd blundered onto some phantom detour. Yet, I knew its impossibility. This road offered no exits, no junctions. It was a singular trajectory through the forest until it surrendered to the small town nestled beyond. Rounding the impossible curve, my eyes caught something ahead. Faint luminescence, akin to a distant municipal lamp. A sigh escaped me, relief a brief, welcome thaw. Perhaps a hamlet, a solitary dwelling, anything to affirm I wasn't utterly adrift in this sylvan ocean. Closer though, the nature of the light resolved itself. Not street lamps, these were wavering, unsteady glows, like candle flames, emanating from within a diminutive, dilapidated structure squatting by the roadside, a petrol station or its skeletal remains, ancient, profoundly so, radiating an aura of decades-long abandonment. Its signage was a tapestry of rust, the windows opaque with grime, the pump's skeletal relics innocent of fuel for perhaps generations. Yet, impossibly, the interior harbored light. Soft, flickering points, the unsteady luminescence of tallow or oil wicks. My speed bled away as I passed, the fine hairs on my nape prickling. Who would occupy such a ruin deep in the nocturnal woods, tending flames in a derelict outpost? My gaze swept the surroundings, hunting for motion, but the road remained vacant, the woods a dense tapestry of shadow. I didn't halt. I pressed onward, yet the farther I traveled, the more profound my sense of displacement became. It was wrong. Nothing resonated with memory. The trees felt alien, the curve defied logic. The station itself was an aberration. There was no petrol station on this route. There had never been one, not in all my passages. But I had seen it undeniably starkly present in the nocturnal gloom. I urged the car faster, seeking distance, escape velocity from that unsettling vision. But the deeper I drove, the more insistent the wrongness became. The road refused to return to its familiar contours. It felt utterly foreign, as though I had slipped through a seam in reality onto a track unrecorded by any map. My heart hammered against my ribs. I checked the phone again. A futile gesture, the screen remained a blank, uncommunicative void. And then I saw it. Again, the petrol station. Identical, the corroded sign, the spectral flickering lights within, positioned just off the tarmac as if patiently awaiting my return. My foot slammed the brake pedal, the car shuddering to a halt. My pulse roared. Impossible! I hadn't reversed direction. No turnings had presented themselves. Yet, somehow, inexplicably, I was precisely where I'd been moments before, confronting the same spectral outpost. I sat frozen, hands strangling the wheel, my thoughts a frantic scramble for logic in the face of the illogical. My headlights painted the antique pumps, stretching their shadows into grotesque figures across the gravel apron. The candlelight within seemed to perform a macabre ballet behind the grimy panes. Every instinct screamed flight, yet another impulse, was it morbid curiosity or nascent terror demanding confrontation, compelled me. Shifting the car into park, I pushed the door open and stepped out. The air struck colder than anticipated, the silence absolute, profound. Only the brittle scrunch of gravel under my boots disturbed the stillness as I approached the station, my breath pluming in the chill. Each step felt weighted, reluctant. Before the entrance, I paused, peering through a filth-streaked window. The interior was cramped, cluttered, shelves burdened with dust-furred tins and faded advertisements. The unsteady light originated from several candles scattered haphazardly, their flames projecting elongated dancing shadows across the floorboards. That's when I registered her. A figure stood behind the counter, her back to me, utterly still. Long, dark hair cascaded over her shoulders, unmoving in the dim, wavering light. Her face remained hidden, but her profound stillness, the sheer absence of even micro-movements, sent a visceral chill through me. I rapped a knuckle against the glass, hoping to draw her notice. No reaction. I knocked again, harder. Silence. She remained as she was, a statue carved from shadow and stillness. I don't know what force guided my hand, but I reached, turned the tarnished handle, and pulled. The door swung inward with a faint groan, triggering a tiny discordant jingle from a bell mounted above. The sound echoed unnaturally in the confined space. Stepping inside, the air met me thick with the scent of decay, dust, aged wood, something else indefinable. "Hello?" My voice emerged thin, trembling. "Is everything all right?" She offered no reply, no turn of the head. I edged closer, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. "Ma'am!" Still, nothing. Another hesitant step forward, and then my gaze fell lower. Her feet, they weren't touching the floor. She hovered, suspended perhaps an inch or two above the grimy linoleum, her form perfectly motionless, save for the faintest, impossible sway of her hair, as if stirred by a breeze that did not exist. I froze solid, every sinew locking. My mind bucked, trying to reconcile the sight with the known laws of the world and failing utterly. A reflexive step backward, pulse thundering in my ears, and behind me the door creaked open once more, the bell tinkling its dissonant chime again. I didn't linger. I didn't wait. I bolted, a raw surge of adrenaline propelling me, stumbling over my own feet in my desperation to reach the car. My hands trembled violently as I fumbled with the ignition, slamming the door shut, thumbing the lock, a laughably inadequate ward. The engine roared to life and I wrenched the wheel, tires spitting gravel as I fled, refusing the urge to glance in the rearview mirror. I drove without pause, without conscious thought, until the familiar, comforting glow of my town emerged from the darkness ahead. The road finally straightened, the oppressive trees receded, and a measure of the crushing tension eased from my shoulders. Pulling into my own driveway, the engine silenced, I sat for a long while, hands still quivering, staring out at the blessedly ordinary empty street. What I witnessed that night remains inexplicable, a tear in the fabric of the expected. How I found that road, why that phantom station manifested twice, these are questions without answers. But one certainty remains etched deep. I will never travel that sylvan passage again. And should you ever find yourself on a road that feels too silent, too profoundly dark, where the familiar twists into the uncanny, I strongly advise you turn back. Some paths are not meant for passage. A shriek of tortured metal split the night stillness as the gate surrendered, swinging inward. I lingered, poised between the mundane world and the overgrown path tunneling toward the Blackwood Sanatorium's skeletal frame. Before us the ruin ascended, a jagged silhouette against the moon-washed sky, its shattered windows like vacant sockets observing our trespass. A profound wrongness settled in my gut, a conviction that this venture was ill-conceived, yet the siren call of the forbidden, amplified by my companion's urging, drew me onward. Don't falter now, Elias. Cora's voice sliced through the quiet, her flashlight beam a frantic pulse against the decaying edifice. She was ever the vanguard, the spark igniting our ill-advised schemes. Drawing a breath thick with night air and apprehension, I crossed the threshold onto the sanatorium grounds. The gate slammed behind me, a resonant clang sealing our intrusion, sending a tremor not of cold, but of consequence, skittering along my nerves. We were 4 souls adrift in this forsaken place. Cora, our impulsive navigator. Reese, her grounded counterpart, tethered by affection and skepticism. Anya, whose eye captured the beauty in decay, camera ever at the ready. And myself, Elias, the perpetually ignored voice of caution. Weeks this escapade had brewed, simmering since Cora unearthed tales of Blackwood's shadowed past. Born in the 19th century's optimism, shuttered abruptly in the 1970s amidst whispers of cruelty and unsanctioned science, the sanatorium had fermented into potent local folklore. Phantoms and daredevils had tested its bounds, repelled by structural decay or the glare of police lights. Tonight, however, felt different. A luminous full moon offered spectral guidance, and a whisper from Cora's cousin, a man of the law, promised lax patrols. The moment felt charged, inevitable. The structure itself seemed to exhale history as we neared the main entrance, a palpable weight pressing down. Vibrant, crude graffiti sprawled across the lower stonework, a desperate modern scrawl failing to obscure the institution's indelible grimness. Anya raised her camera, the flash momentarily resurrecting the porch from its decrepitude, capturing its state of arrested collapse. "All right, the pact," Cora murmured, the thrill vibrating in her low tones. "We stay tethered, minimal contact with anything. One voice calls retreat. We all heed. Understood?" Nods answered her, though Reese's weary sigh was audible. He deemed the entire ghost hunt preposterous, yet his presence beside Cora was non-negotiable. A heavy chain barred the main doors, a futile guardian against time if not intruders. Reese, armed with bolt cutters brought for this precise purpose, severed the links with surprising ease. The chain cascaded onto the stone, the clatter echoing disproportionately in the vast silence. Cora applied pressure, and the great door groaned open, releasing a miasma of trapped time, stale air, damp plaster, and something indefinably organic. To step inside was to breach a membrane between worlds. Our flashlight beams carved through the gloom, illuminating a reception hall preserved in dust and stillness. Skeletal chairs slumped against peeling walls. A monolithic desk stood sentinel, strewn with desiccated documents and the husks of long-dead flora. "Astounding," Anya whispered, the rapid clicks of her camera punctuating the silence, as if they simply vanished mid-breath. We ventured deeper, our footfalls swallowed by the decaying grandeur. Corridors branched off, lined with doors promising forgotten sorrows. My light snagged on an inscription gouged into the paint. 2 words scratched with frantic energy. "Help me." A knot tightened in my stomach, a chill tracing the imprint of those desperate letters. The atmosphere grew heavier with each step, the air thickening, saturated with the particulate ghosts of dust and dissolution. We drifted past former treatment rooms, archaic apparatus looming like rusted specters in the penumbra. An overturned gurney in a darkened alcove startled us collectively, its wheels emitting a faint, protesting squeak as our passage disturbed its decades-long repose. "Look at this," Reese called out, his voice jarringly loud. He stood before a formidable metal door, its surface deeply scored as if by frantic claws. Someone was keen on leaving. As we converged, a detail pricked my awareness. This door, unlike its surroundings, bore less dust, a subtle cleanliness that felt discordant. Before the thought could fully form, Cora was already shouldering it open. The space beyond was an absolute void, devouring our light. Stepping across the threshold, I felt an abrupt shift. The air cooled, stirred by a phantom current impossible within the sanatorium's sealed heart. "People, this feels wrong," I managed, my voice a strained whisper. "Perhaps we should reconsider." The sentence died, strangled by the violent slam of the door behind us. A concussion of sound, then impenetrable darkness. Anya cried out, followed by the sharp clatter of her camera striking the unseen floor. "What in God's name?" Reese's voice was taut, frayed with nascent panic. "Cora, you there? Everyone all right?" My fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, fumbled with my flashlight. When the beam finally sliced through the black, it illuminated not the crumbling asylum, but an impossible scene. A laboratory, stark and modern, surfaces of gleaming stainless steel reflecting the soft hum of hidden machinery. "This can't be," Cora breathed, her earlier bravado utterly extinguished. "Where are we?" No answer came, only the hiss of pneumatics as a door slid open at the room's far end. A figure emerged, silhouetted against an unseen light source. Its form was disturbingly wrong, elongated, limbs jointed at unnatural angles, defying human anatomy. "Welcome," it intoned, the voice a grating synthesis of metal and static that set my teeth on edge. "Your arrival has been anticipated." Raw panic ignited. We spun, desperate for the exit, only to find the doorway replaced by a seamless, unyielding wall. Entrapment. What ensued was a disorienting plunge into nightmare. Strobing lights, piercing alarms, the unceasing terrifying proximity of our inhuman captors. They moved us through sterile labyrinths, isolated us, subjected us to examinations and processes my mind refuses to fully recall. Violations that transcended the physical. Time dissolved. It might have been hours, it could have been days before I found myself deposited back in that initial laboratory, my companions beside me. But we were altered. Changed in ways both subtle and seismic. Anya's eyes, when they caught the ambient light, held a faint phosphorescent glow. A metallic luster seemed embedded in Reese's very skin. Cora was present, yet fundamentally absent, a vessel strangely emptied. The figure reappeared, observing us. Its featureless face somehow projected an air of cold satisfaction. "The preliminary phase is concluded," it rasped. "You are free to depart." And just like that, release. We stood blinking under the moonlight, back before the looming facade of Blackwood Sanatorium, the transition seamless, surreal. Yet the illusion of normalcy shattered instantly. The sanatorium's windows now pulsed with a faint, otherworldly luminescence. A low, resonant hum emanated from its depths. We stumbled away, retreating toward the gate, each cocooned in the shock of our experience, grappling with the incomprehensible. Reaching the rusted gate, I cast one final glance back. The asylum seemed to waver, its familiar lines blurring, shimmering. For a fleeting instant, I perceived its true nature. Not a decaying relic of human history, but a sophisticated camouflage, masking something profoundly advanced, utterly alien. We never truly spoke of that night. What words could contain it? Who would lend credence to such a tale? Yet sometimes the uncanny glimmer in Anya's gaze, or the way light catches Reese's skin with an unnatural sheen, serves as a visceral reminder. The experience remains indelible, a scar on reality. Late at night, under the impartial gaze of the full moon, when the world falls quiet, I sometimes fancy I hear it, that abrasive metallic voice echoing from Blackwood, calling me back to the place where normalcy fractured, where I suspect fragments of us remain irrevocably entangled. I cannot say if we unearthed a secret buried for decades or blundered into something never intended for human perception. I know only this. Should the urge arise to explore another ruin, another forgotten corner whispering promises of adventure, I will turn and walk, no, run, the other way. Certain unknowns are best left undisturbed. Certain doors should remain forever sealed. Yet even as I vow this, a chilling certainty persists. Blackwood was not an isolated incident. It was merely a glimpse. Somewhere in other derelict structures in the planet's shadowed folds, similar operations may be unfolding. A cold curiosity laced with dread makes me wonder what happens when the entities behind it all decide the masquerade is over. For now, I attempt normalcy. Head down, senses attuned, but vigilance is a permanent state. Once you've peered behind reality's curtain, ignorance is an impossible luxury. The true horror wasn't contained within those walls. It's the gnawing awareness that it is still out there, patient perhaps, waiting for the next curious souls to push open the wrong door. The city bled away behind me, Friday dissolving into the void of midnight. Denver's sprawl yielded to the humming solitude of the highway. my car a lone vessel adrift on an asphalt ocean. Exhaustion gnawed, a dull ache behind the eyes. Home felt impossibly distant. The freeway, usually a snarl of light and metal, stretched unnervingly vacant. The engines thrummed the only constant pulse in the oppressive quiet. Around 12:15 a.m., the world outside seemed vacuum-sealed, the neon pulse of sporadic fueling stations casting spectral elongations across the tarmac. Urban clamor was a forgotten language, replaced by the faint, mournful cry of a distant dog, the dry rustle of unseen things skittering beyond the light's reach. Weekend thoughts, reunions, reprieve, flickered like faulty bulbs against the encroaching weight of sleep. Emerging onto Route 70, the road unfurled, a black skein drawn taut through the slumbering landscape. Headlights punched impotent holes in the gloom, illuminating only empty lanes, the occasional fleeting twin glows of another car vanishing too swiftly to register. Barren trees clawed at the periphery. The land lay flat, indifferent beneath the endless ribbon of road. Perhaps 15 miles swallowed by the journey, a silhouette materialized at the road's edge, a flicker of concern. Stranded traveler, warred with primal caution. The shape wore a coat, ancient and shapeless, clutching something indistinct, maybe a torch. My foot eased off the accelerator, a nervous tremor vibrating up from the floorboards. Alone, out here, this late, it felt dissonant. I guided the car onto the gravel shoulder, the engine settling into a soft, expectant idle. Darkness pulled behind, absolute save for my headlamps and the faraway sodium glare of a lone standard lamp. Window down, the night air cool against my skin. "Evening," I called out, the sound swallowed quickly. "Need a lift somewhere?" Stillness answered for a beat, then the figure began a measured advance. Their face remained obscured, a geography of shadow, but their gait held an unnerving lack of urgency. Closer now, I saw the slight tremble in their hands, the restless flicker of their eyes scanning the night. "A ride would be good, yes." The voice emerged, low, textured like old parchment, tinged with an accent I couldn't quite pin, Slavic perhaps. A knot of apprehension tightened in my gut, yet the desolation argued for companionship, however brief. "All right, get in," I managed, thumbing the lock. They slipped into the back seat with surprising swiftness, a silent presence settling behind me. Gear engaged, wheels biting gravel, we rejoined the asphalt river. A glance in the rearview mirror revealed eyes fixed forward, unblinking, seeming to pierce the very fabric of the night ahead. Silence descended, thick and insulating, broken only by the engine's drone and the rhythmic crunch as we traversed unseen dips and rises. Tentative questions about their destination met with clipped monosyllables or silence. 10 minutes crawled by. "So," I tried again, louder this time. "Whereabouts are you headed?" Finally, a response, barely audible above the road noise. "Home. I got turned around." A simple nod from me, masking unease. Getting lost happened. "Which way did you come from?" A vague gesture towards the left, towards impenetrable darkness. "Hawthorne Lane." But it's all mixed up now. My phone's map glowed. Hawthorne Lane snaked near the old Whispering Creek Mill miles back. "There's a service station coming up in a few miles. We can stop if you need directions." Another nod, but the tension in their posture remained palpable. The miles spooled out, interminable. Darkness wasn't just absence of light. It felt dense, viscous, thickening with every rotation of the tires. Then something flickered in the rearview mirror. A fleeting movement, a shadow pacing the car just beyond the window. A jolt, adrenaline spiking. I snapped my head around. Nothing. Empty lane, empty night. Back to the mirror. Still empty. Imagination, surely. Fatigue playing tricks. Yet the passenger remained unnervingly still, a statue carved from shadow. Focus, Leo. Focus on the road. But the sensation lingered, eyes on the back of my neck. The highway curved, headlights carving a hesitant path. Through the arc, the skeletal frame of a farmhouse emerged, derelict and mournful. Windows boarded like blinded eyes, porch sagging under the weight of neglect. A shiver traced my spine, unrelated to the night air. "That's the old Creek Mill farmhouse," I offered, aiming for casual. "Abandoned for decades." The passenger stirred, nodding slowly. "A bad place, this darkness." A nervous chuckle escaped me. "Yeah, gets under your skin sometimes." We slid past the decaying structure, but the feeling of being observed intensified, prickling my awareness. My grip tightened on the wheel. Another glance at the passenger, still locked in that forward stare. Suddenly, a violent shudder rocked the car, a pothole, deep and jarring. The engine coughed, sputtering with an ugly, unfamiliar sound. I cursed, easing onto the shoulder again, killing the engine. "Hang on, let me take a look." The passenger didn't move, their gaze following me as I climbed out. Flashlight beam cutting the dark, I popped the hood. Engine block, hoses, belts, coated in road grime but nothing obviously amiss. No snapped belts, no leaking fluids. "Looks okay," I called back, sliding into the driver's seat, the passenger's silent scrutiny unnerving. "Just a bad bump, I guess." The engine turned over smoothly, purring back to life. Relief warred with residual tension. Deep breath. "Okay, station's not far now." We pressed on. The road seemed to constrict, trees leaning in, their branches interlacing overhead, swallowing the already meager light. My headlights felt feeble against the encroaching black. Glances back at the passenger became more frequent, their quietude growing heavier, more sinister with each passing mile. 10 more minutes dissolved. Then, salvation. The faint, flickering aura of the service station ahead. Relief washed through me, cool and immediate. "There we go, let's pull in." I guided the car into the brightly lit forecourt, cutting the engine. "All right, fill up, grab a coffee." The passenger nodded, a hand dipping into a coat pocket. "Thank you." I unlocked the doors, but before they could move, an unnatural gust of wind slammed through the lot, rattling signs, carrying an icy chill that penetrated the car's interior. I shivered violently. "You okay?" I asked, turning. They nodded, but their hands, I saw now, were visibly trembling. Just cold. I stepped out, heading for the pump, the automated process a welcome distraction. Yet my eyes kept straying to the car, to the still figure inside, staring ahead. This felt wrong, deeply wrong. The unease was a physical presence now, coiling in my stomach. Tank full, I returned, sliding back behind the wheel, trying to project normalcy I didn't feel. The passenger hadn't moved. "Okay, let's get you closer to home," I said, turning the ignition key. As we pulled away from the island of light, back towards the waiting dark, I risked one more look at my passenger. They were turned now, gazing out the side window at something beyond my sight. The knot in my stomach tightened into a fist. "Everything all right back there?" They turned to face me, and I saw their eyes, truly saw them. Pale, depthless voids, utterly empty. "I think," they whispered, the sound barely disturbing the air, "you should continue alone." Confusion warred with rising fear. "What? What are you talking about? You needed a ride home." A slow shake of the head, their expression distant, detached. "No." You need to leave this place. Now." Before the words fully registered, a high-pitched screech tore through the night, emanating from the station behind us. I whipped around. The station's fluorescent lights flickered violently, then dimmed, plunging the forecourt into near darkness. The wind howled, a mournful cry through the skeletal trees lining the road. Silence descended, absolute and terrifying. What the hell is happening? Panic clawed at my throat. No answer. Instead, the figure in the back seat began to shimmer, losing substance, becoming ethereal, translucent, ghostly. My eyes widened, refusing to process. Wait! What? My hand shot out, grasping at empty air where solid form had been moments before. No! Don't! Gone. Vanished utterly, leaving only the faint, lingering chill and the indentation on the seat. Heart hammering against my ribs, I sat frozen, breath catching in my throat. Hallucination? Sheer exhaustion? The late hour, the stress? It had to be. "Okay, Leo," I muttered, voice trembling. "Just tired. Need to get home." Engine roaring back to life, I peeled away from the dying lights of the station. The road ahead feeling alien, charged with unseen energy. The air inside the car remained frigid, the silence profound. 5 miles further down the relentless highway, another figure, standing by the roadside. Identical silhouette. "No," I breathed, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Not again." Slowing, heart pounding a frantic rhythm, expecting them to approach, but they remained motionless, watching. I pulled over again, a moth drawn to a terrifying flame, idling engine a fragile shield. Window cracked open. "Hey, you, need another ride?" Silence. The figure didn't stir. Dread, cold and heavy, settled in my bones. "Hello?" My voice cracked. Then it began to move, slowly, deliberately, towards the car, face lost in shadow. Panic surged, overwhelming caution. "Nope, gotta go." Tires squealed as I slammed the accelerator, wrenching the car back onto the highway. A frantic glance in the rearview mirror, the figure stood impassively on the shoulder, receding but still watching. Mind racing, scrambling for a rational explanation. Elaborate prank, stress-induced delusion, or something else? Foot hard on the gas, pushing the engine, desperate for distance. The car's interior felt like a tomb, my breath pluming in the frigid air. The highway stretched, infinite, the darkness absolute. Then, flashing lights ahead, red and blue strobing against the black. A police cruiser parked on the shoulder. Relief, sharp and piercing, mingled with a fresh wave of anxiety. Maybe he could explain. Pulling over, engine ticking. An officer approached, flashlight beam sweeping across my face. "Everything all right, sir?" His voice was calm, routine. I nodded, struggling to steady my own. "Yeah, fine. Just long drive." His gaze flickered past me towards the empty passenger seat. "Got company tonight?" "Had," I corrected, gesturing vaguely. "Picked up a hitchhiker back there. They, disappeared." The officer's expression shifted, a flicker of something knowing, weary. "Disappeared, you say?" A cold dread seeped into me. "What do you mean?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Been getting calls about a phantom on this stretch of Route 70 for years. Pick someone up, usually near the old Mill Road turnoff. They ride for a bit, then vanish. Poof. Sometimes folks see him again further down." I stared, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. "So, it's real?" He gave a solemn nod. "Seems to be. Don't know the why of it. Best advice? Stay calm, keep driving, I'll let you get on." He turned, walking back to his cruiser, leaving me utterly alone with the impossible truth on the desolate highway. Numbness gave way to trembling. Phantom hitchhiker. Years. My hands shook as I restarted the car. Fear warred with a strange validation. Pulling away the image of the fading passenger, the officer's resigned confirmation, it all swirled in my head. The road felt longer now, each mile marker a monument to my terror. Every glance in the mirror was fraught, expecting to see those empty eyes staring back. The remainder of the drive was a haze of adrenaline and exhaustion. Finally, the distant glow of Denver emerged, a sanctuary on the horizon. Merging onto familiar streets felt like surfacing from deep water. The city's ambient light and noise were a balm. Pulling into my apartment complex, the mundane glow of building lights felt like salvation. Out of the car, I leaned against the cool metal, taking deep, ragged breaths. The night's events felt like a fever dream, vivid and terrifying. Inside, door locked, bolted, I slumped against it, heart still racing. The silence, the vanishing, the officer's words, a relentless loop in my mind. Haunted highways weren't just stories anymore. Phone check. A futile attempt at normalcy. Notifications blurred. A text from a friend about a weekend getaway. Automatic reply. Yeah, sounds good. Couch swallowed me, but sleep remained elusive. The phantom's presence lingered, an icy residue in my thoughts. Who was she? Why this road? Morning light brought clarity, but not peace. An insistent curiosity gnawed at me. I had to drive Route 70 again in daylight, see it stripped of its nocturnal menace. Maybe it would make sense. The highway bustled, sun glinting off chrome, the world ordinary. No lone figures, no spectral shadows. Foolish, perhaps, to chase ghosts in the daytime, yet the fear remained, a low hum beneath the surface. Halfway along the familiar stretch, near the Mill Road turnoff, a car was pulled over. A man stood beside it, thumb out. He looked familiar. A jolt, like static electricity. Heart skipped. Driving slower, window down. "Hey," I called, voice tight. "Trouble?" He turned, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Unsettlingly familiar. "Could use a lift if you're heading towards Denver." Hesitation warred with a strange compulsion. "Yeah, hop in." The passenger door clicked open. He settled in, quiet, just like before. The drive resumed, the air thick with unspoken tension. Glances in the mirror confirmed it. The same stillness, the same forward gaze. Miles ticked by. "Where you coming from?" I ventured. A brief glance my way, then back to the road. Just passing through. His hands rested on his lap, unnaturally still. "Need anything?" A slight shake of the head. "No, thank you. Just need to get home." The words echoed, chillingly familiar. A shiver traced its way down my spine. "Okay, let me know." Silence stretched again, taut and heavy. My focus frayed, thoughts snagged on déjà vu, on the impossible possibility. Then, my phone shrilled, startling me. My friend. "Leo, still on for this weekend?" "Yeah," I managed, trying to sound normal. "On my way now." Hanging up, I glanced back. His eyes met mine, a flash of something unreadable. Recognition? Warning. My pulse hammered. "You all right?" I asked, forcing casualness. He nodded, face blank. "Fine." Deep breath. "Drop it." "Okay, nearly at the turnoff." We reached the exit ramp for the rendezvous point. "This is me," I said, turning to him. "Need dropping anywhere specific?" A small nod. Seatbelt unclicked. "Thanks for the ride." He stepped out, turned, and simply walked away down the ramp, merging with other travelers. No vanishing, no drama. Just gone. Relief warred with profound unease. Right, I muttered, pulling away. Off I go. The rest of the trip was uneventful, the tension slowly receding. But the twin encounters lingered, blurring the lines of reality. Back home, the need for answers became overwhelming. Online searches, Route 70, Phantom Hitchhiker, Whispering Creek Mill. Articles surfaced, local legends, a tragic story, decades old. Alina Volkov, young woman, car trouble near the mill one rainy night. Accepted a ride from a stranger. Car found abandoned days later. Alina, never seen again. Her spirit, they said, haunted the highway, forever seeking the ride home she never completed. It clicked. The silence, the vanishing, the pleas. Alina trapped in a loop of her final moments. A wave of empathy washed over the fear. I couldn't just know, I had to do something. I found a name, Dr. Aris Thorne, a local historian, an expert on regional folklore and hauntings. He listened intently to my story over coffee, his eyes sharp with academic curiosity. If Alina's presence is tied to unresolved trauma, Thorne suggested, acknowledging her, perhaps fulfilling her final need, might offer release. Purpose solidified within me. That night I drove back to the Whispering Creek mill site, now a neglected patch of parkland, trees standing sentinel around the decaying structure. The air hung still, pregnant with unseen history. Parking the car, I walked towards the mill, flashlight beam cutting a nervous swathe. The skeletal frame loomed, sighing softly in the faint breeze. A palpable weight settled around me, the air turning noticeably colder, my breath misting. Reaching the mill's crumbling foundation, the silence felt absolute. "Alina?" I called out, voice hushed, respectful. "Alina Volkov? I know your story. I want to help." Only the creak of ancient timbers answered. I circled the structure, flashlight probing the shadows. Then a whisper, faint as moth wings against my ear. "Help me." I froze, recognizing the raspy undertone. "Alina? Yes. Tell me how." The whisper gained strength, urgency. "Home. Need to go home." Determination surged. "I understand. I'll help you find peace. Tell me what you need." A pause, then the whisper returned, clearer now, guiding. "The letter, under the old oak, holds the truth." I scanned the periphery, locating the massive gnarled oak Thorne had mentioned, its branches like dark veins against the sky. Kneeling at its base, pushing aside damp leaves, my light caught the corner of something buried. An envelope, old, brittle, stained with earth. Carefully I unearthed it, brushing away the dirt. Inside, a folded sheet of paper, ink faded but legible. "To whoever finds this," it read. "My name is Alina Volkov. That night, I was stranded, desperate. I trusted someone on this road. It was a mistake I couldn't undo. Please know, I meant no harm to anyone. I just want to rest. Help me find peace. Thank you." Tears blurred the words. Her fear, her regret, resonated across the decades. "I'll help you, Alina," I whispered, clutching the fragile paper. "Your story will be known." I carefully replaced the letter in its envelope. Standing, a profound sense of closure washed over me. "I hope you find your way home now." As if in answer, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves around me, carrying not chill but a sense of release, of gratitude. The oppressive weight lifted. The air felt clean. My task felt complete. Returning to the car, the first hint of dawn painted the eastern sky. The highway stretched before me, silent, peaceful. Driving away from the mill, a quiet sense of accomplishment settled within me. Alina's vigil was over. The phantom of Route 70 could finally rest. The next night, compelled by a lingering curiosity, I drove the route one last time. The darkness felt different. Just darkness, no longer menacing. The road was empty. Glancing in the rearview mirror revealed only the receding ribbon of asphalt. No shadows paced the car. No pale eyes stared back. Just the road. I smiled, a genuine release of tension. The highway was just a highway again. Pulling into my complex, I cast a final look back at the dark ribbon of Route 70, now free. The memory would remain, etched deep, but the fear was gone, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of having helped a lost soul finally find her way. The exit beckoned, a promise of release after the long shift. My checks were done, fatigue a heavy cloak on my shoulders, home the only destination my thoughts would entertain. Then, a thread of sound, spun through the speaker linked to the main stage microphone, arrested my steps. A hum, gossamer thin, a woman's voice tracing an unfamiliar melody. In that instant, the mundane trajectory of my night shattered. I halted beside the mixing console, my gaze fixed on the vacant, shadowed stage. A sudden, sharp percussion hammered beneath my ribs. No soul occupied that space. The sound system slumbered on standby. A phantom signal? Interference bleeding from some stray frequency. Logic offered thin comfort. I resolved to trace the lines once more. A final diligence before surrender. Midnight approached and then passed as I meticulously examined every connection, every input, every filament of wire. Nothing. No fault, no explanation. Yet the hum remained, an echo imprinted on the quiet canvas of my mind. Afternoon sunlight, thick with dust motes, slanted through the high windows when I returned the following day. Routine demanded pre-show tests. I arrived first, as was my custom, preferring the theater's echoing solitude to the chatter of colleagues. Power amps hummed to life. Microphones yielded only silence under my scrutiny. No spectral static, no lingering vocals. Relief, brief, and shallow. The evening's performance unfolded without incident. Afterward, amidst the familiar ritual of gathering stray cables, coiling them with practiced hands, I lingered on the stage. The cavernous space emptied. I secured the heavy back door, extinguished the main stage lights, plunging the rows of seats into profound darkness. Descending to the booth for the final shutdown sequence, a familiar prickle traced the nape of my neck, skin tightening like a drawn drumhead. It returned. The same ethereal voice, now weaving a different sequence of notes, clearer this time. A difficult swallow, a conscious effort to quell the rising tide of unease. From the booth's vantage, I threw the stage lights back on, bathing the crimson curtains in stark illumination. Empty. The seats, vacant eyes staring back. The aisles, deserted channels. The stage, a bare platform. Yet the sound persisted, undeniably channeled through the monitors. The fine hairs on my forearms lifted, a knot tightened in my chest. One by one, I silenced each channel on the console. The voice sang on, unwavering, until the master mute plunged the theater into absolute silence. Morning brought the need to share, to test the experience against another's reality. I recounted the events to Leo and Maya during our pre-shift briefing. Their expressions shifted from polite attention to thinly veiled skepticism. Fatigue, they suggested, played tricks on the ear. Long hours, stress. I offered no argument, though inwardly, certainty coiled tight. This wasn't exhaustion's mirage. My senses were sharp, honed by years spent dissecting sound. Every subtle tone, every whisper of feedback, every electronic sigh. Detecting anomalies wasn't just a job, it was the core of my craft. Invention had no place in it. Later, during a lull in the afternoon's preparations, a compulsion took hold. A full system diagnostic. Hours bled away as I immersed myself in the labyrinth of technology. Microphone lines, wireless transmitters, frequency allocations, the intricate guts of every amplifier and processor. I hunted for the flaw, the glitch, the crossed wire that would restore order. Nothing. Not a single aberrant signal, not a whisper of malfunction. A part of me prayed for silence, for the phenomenon to cease. Yet, a deeper, more insistent curiosity stirred. I needed confirmation, the comfort of a technical explanation. But honesty admitted a darker fascination. A pull towards hearing that voice again, an incipient obsession taking root. That night the stage pulsed with the vibrant energy of a musical revue. I remained backstage, managing the delicate dance of microphones, while Clara, the stage manager, orchestrated cues from the wings. Business as usual. The final bows faded, the applause subsided, the audience dispersed. Once more the familiar post-show rhythm. Retrieve equipment, coil cables, power down the stage illumination. Back in the sanctuary, or perhaps the cage of the sound booth, I initiated the shutdown sequence. A tremor, slight but distinct, ran down my arms as I keyed the main microphone for a final check. Alone in the dim glow of the console, I spoke the ritual words, testing, 1, 2, my eyes tracking the level meters. Silence. A fragile sense of relief bloomed, only to be instantly vaporized. A whisper, soft, sibilant, unmistakably shaping my name. Silas. I froze, every muscle locking. A woman's voice, intimate and slow. My gaze snapped to the console meters. Barely a flicker. But my ears, instruments I trusted implicitly, did not deceive. A sudden violent surge hammered in my chest. My mouth turned to dust. Sweat beaded on my palms. I pivoted, scanning the rows of empty seats shrouded in darkness. Nothing stirred. The stage remained a void. No movement, no presence. Leaning towards the microphone again, my voice raspy, I managed, "Who's there?" Only a low, indifferent crackle answered. Rising from the chair, my legs unsteady, I strode towards the stage access. My hand found the switch panel, flooding the auditorium with the harsh glare of work lights. Every detail sprang into sharp relief. The tiered ranks of seats, the shadowed aisles, the vast expanse of the stage itself. Utterly deserted. Why I lowered my voice, I couldn't say. But the question emerged as barely more than a breath. "Is anyone here?" The words echoed back, mocking the silence. I moved backstage, a deliberate sweep through dressing rooms still smelling faintly of grease paint and hairspray, down narrow corridors, peering into shadowed corners where props lay like sleeping beasts. Each space yielded only emptiness. Returning to the booth, I systematically powered down every console, every amplifier, forcing a mechanical end to the encounter. Leaving felt like a retreat, my body tremulous, my thoughts a chaotic storm. Elias, who commanded the theater's constellations of light, met my hesitant account the next day with a wry smirk. "Sounds like you need a long vacation, Silas. Maybe somewhere quiet." His dismissal stung, but I couldn't fault him. The tale belonged more to folklore than to technical reports. Yet, a conviction, deep and visceral, insisted this was no phantom of fatigue. Something resided within these walls. That evening, driven by a restless need for answers, I arrived well before call time. Armed with a flashlight, I ascended the narrow metal stairs to the catwalks, navigating the high, dusty pathways above the stage. Old cables, thick with grime, snaked alongside dormant lighting fixtures, relics of past productions. I searched for a hidden speaker, a forgotten wire, any anomaly that might birth such spectral sounds. Nothing but dust and disuse. Around 5, Clara arrived, outlining the night's modest production. A small-scale play, minimal technical demands. I kept my spectral investigations private. Throughout the performance, I remained anchored near the sound console, my hearing stretched taut, listening beneath the dialogue and sound cues. All systems performed flawlessly. The play concluded, the applause faded, the theater emptied once more. I commenced the shutdown ritual, clearing the stage, securing microphones, coiling cables, darkening the house. By 11, I was back at the console in the booth, tracing a recalcitrant cable patch. The air felt thick, charged with an unseen current. Then the hum returned. Faint at first, a subtle vibration beneath the silence. I activated the monitors. The sound swelled, coalescing into that now familiar, unsettling melody sung by the unseen vocalist. My ribcage seemed to resonate with the sound. My focus narrowed, locking onto the darkened stage. Tentatively, I opened a single channel on the console, hoping to isolate, to capture. Instead, a whisper slipped through, intimate and commanding. "Come here." A full-body jolt threw me back against the chair. My jaw clamped shut. A film of sweat instantly slicked my forehead. The impulse to cry out died in my throat. The voice repeated, softer now, yet undeniably persuasive. "Come here." Gentle, yes, but laced with something that twisted my insides into knots. Pushing away from the console, I descended the steps to the main floor, heart hammering against my ribs, legs feeling strangely disconnected. Down the center aisle I walked, my gaze fixed on the stage, a battleground of questions warring within me. Why this compulsion? Why the irrational sense that obedience was necessary? The voice breathed my name again. Silas, so faint it was almost lost. I mounted the steps onto the stage, the floorboards groaning under my weight. Only the single spectral ghost light offered illumination backstage. My eyes scanned the heavy velour curtains, the thick ropes disappearing into the fly space, the painted backdrop depicting a forgotten scene. Everything appeared static, yet a sense of unseen movement prickled the air. I slipped behind the main curtain, navigating past dormant set pieces and a grand piano shrouded in dust, silent for years. The voice ceased. I stood motionless, listening, straining against the low thrum of the building's ventilation. My pulse roared in my ears, then a soft, breathy laugh from the stage left wing. I spun, nearly tangling my feet in a coiled power cord, and directed my flashlight beam towards the sound. A door. Unassuming, leading down into the subterranean depths of basement storage, a cluttered, musty realm I rarely entered. The laughter, the voice, seemed to emanate from its vicinity. Closer I moved, the flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, playing over dusty walls, the concrete floor, haphazard stacks of discarded scenery. My hand reached for the door handle, unlocked. Easing it open, I peered down into darkness. Dust motes danced in the beam. The air hit me, damp, stale, subterranean. I stepped onto the top step, testing my footing, the scrape of my shoe loud on the concrete. The heavy door swung shut behind me with a dull thud that made me jump, expelling a sharp breath. My hands trembled. "Hello?" The word bounced off unseen stone walls, returning flat and empty. Reaching the bottom step, I scanned the space. Rows of metal shelves sagged under the weight of forgotten props, defunct lighting gear, tangled cables. Vacant chairs huddled in a corner like silent conspirators. The air felt denser here, colder. Fumbling overhead, I found a dangling pull chain switch. A bare bulb flickered to life, casting a weak yellow glow over the dust and cobwebs. Methodically, I searched, peering behind shelves, under tables draped in gray sheets. No one. A creeping certainty that I'd made a grave error began to crawl up my spine. The urge to flee intensified. As I turned towards the stairs, the voice whispered my name again. Silas. So close it felt breathed directly onto my skin. The hairs on my neck and arms sprang erect. I whirled, flashlight beam slashing wildly. Near a stack of leaning flats, painted canvas walls from some long-dead play, a shadow seemed to detach itself, then melt back into the gloom. My pulse surged, a frantic drumming that shook my hand. Speech failed me, my throat constricted. I forced my legs forward, drawn towards the stacked scenery, a dizzying wave of nausea washing over me. Reaching the flats, I held my breath. Nothing lunged from the shadows. I swept the light back and forth, nudged aside some collapsed cardboard boxes. Only debris and settled dust. Then, the faintest sensation, a whisper of displaced air against my neck, like a sigh exhaled inches away. My entire body went rigid. I spun again, light beam stabbing the emptiness. One word, breathed so low it barely registered. Stay. My knees buckled, invisible yet undeniably present. I struggled for breath, fought to anchor my reeling thoughts. Sweat dripped, stinging my eyes. Escape. Now. I yanked the light chain, plunging the basement back into darkness, scrambled up the concrete steps, and pushed through the door. Backstage normality felt alien, hyper-real. Every shadow seemed poised to move. I expected something, but there was nothing. Setting the flashlight on a nearby shelf, I crossed the stage, locked the basement door firmly behind me, deliberately ignoring the lingering presence. My flight to the booth was swift, the shutdown sequence executed with frantic haste. Out the main exit, into the night air, not even pausing for the final lockup. My hands refused to still until I was miles away, locked inside my own home, staring sleeplessly at the ceiling. The following days were lived on a knife's edge. The theater, once a place of professional focus, now felt menacing in its quiet moments. I sought refuge in the presence of others, manufacturing reasons to leave promptly after shows. But solitude was an inevitable part of the job. Eventually, a late-night close-up fell to me again. Steel yourself, I thought. Be quick. Final checks on the board, cables coiled with forced efficiency. To ward off the silence, I'd set my phone to play music softly. A futile gesture. Minutes into the task, the music abruptly ceased. A glance at the phone, still powered on, audio inexplicably paused. Then, through the monitors, clear and unavoidable. The voice. Silas. My hands began to shake again. My mouth went instantly dry. Don't ignore me, it commanded. The phone nearly slipped from my grasp. My breathing grew shallow, rapid. What do you want? I muttered, the words feeling absurdly theatrical, addressed to empty space. The voice seemed to materialize directly behind me. Follow. My heart hammered violently, a trapped bird against my ribs. Towards the stage door I drifted, eyes darting left and right, searching for a hidden prankster, a stowaway. The hallway stretched into darkness, silent and still. I hesitated, instinct screaming retreat, while a perverse curiosity urged me onward. Backstage, I moved with stealth born of fear. Footsteps softened on the concrete, navigating the familiar maze of crates and costume racks. A low hum surfaced, a single sustained note, seemingly drawing me towards the stage left wing. It led me around towering stacks of flats, past wheeled racks draped in fabric, stopping abruptly before a locked supply closet. The hum vanished. I tried the knob, secured fast. A surge of frustration mixed with fear. What secrets did it hold? I lacked the key. Retreating, I abandoned the search for the night, collected my backpack from the booth, and fled the building. mind churning with questions about that mundane closet, repository for obsolete sound gear I'd never spared a thought for. I resolved to ask Clara for the key. Sleep offered no respite, the voice a recurring echo in the dark. The next morning, feigning a need for inventory, I procured the key from Clara. Her casual shrug a stark contrast to my internal turmoil. I waited until the theater emptied again that night, craving absolute privacy for what felt like a necessary trespass. Around 10, key cold in my palm, I approached the closet. The corridor smelled sharply of new paint from a freshly touched-up set piece. My own footsteps sounded unnervingly loud. Heart pounding, I reached the door, inserted the key, felt the satisfying click of the lock yielding. Pushing the door inward, I fumbled for the light switch. A single bulb overhead sputtered, then cast a weak glow over the cramped space. Shelves lined the walls, burdened with the ghosts of technology. Ancient mixing consoles, fractured microphones, Gordian knots of cable. Dust lay thick on everything. I stepped inside, surveying the clutter. Nothing seemed amiss, no obvious source for the phenomena. Then the light flickered erratically. A chill traced my arms, accompanied by an odd compressing pressure in my chest. The hum returned, low and resonant, seemingly originating from within the closet itself. It vibrated in my bones. I knelt, opening a large road case. Inside lay a dusty, archaic mixer, coiled wires like sleeping snakes, a scattering of spare fuses. In one corner, someone had scratched a name into the taped surface, illegible beneath layers of grime. The hum intensified. Adrenaline surged. I glanced back at the open doorway. The corridor remained empty, silent. "I'm here," I whispered, the sound swallowed by the small space. "What do you want me to see?" The hum abruptly cut out. Silence pressed in, amplifying the sound of my own ragged breathing. Then, a soft sigh, undeniably close, directly behind my head. I spun, flashlight beam cutting the air. Nothing. My lungs burned. Sweat trickled down my spine. I leaned heavily against a shelf, fighting for composure. Without warning, the overhead bulb extinguished, plunging the closet into near-total darkness, relieved only by the weak beam of my flashlight. A hushed whisper followed. Words indistinct but felt more than heard, warm and unnervingly intimate against my ear. Primal fear took over. Scrabbling towards the doorway, flashlight beam dancing frantically, I stumbled back into the corridor. Just as I crossed the threshold, my name, Silas, spoken with chilling clarity, as if the speaker stood inches away. I froze mid-stride, unable, unwilling to turn back. Nausea churned. My legs threatened to give way. I slammed the closet door shut, fumbling with the key until the lock clicked home. Then I ran, not stopping until I burst through the stage door into the cool night air, gasping. Outside, leaning against the cool brickwork, I gulped air, trying to steady the frantic rhythm of my heart. My shirt clung damply. A dull ache throbbed behind my eyes. The presence, the voice, it had lured me to that closet. Why? What did it want me to find? Or was it merely a trap, a lure into its disembodied world? The questions circled endlessly, offering no answers. The theater itself felt sentient, watchful. I resolved then to keep this haunting private. No more skeptical glances from Leo or Maya. No more patronizing advice from Elias. They wouldn't comprehend. Over the ensuing nights, the voice persisted. Sometimes a fleeting snatch of melody woven into the ambient hum of the building. Sometimes my name whispered from the shadows. A morbid fascination warred constantly with stark terror. I learned to expedite my closing duties, moving with brisk, determined steps, yet hyper-aware of every creak and sigh of the old structure. My body remained coiled, perpetually braced for the next encounter. Each time the voice manifested, the familiar cascade returned, the twisting gut, the parched mouth, the blood roaring in my ears. I continue my work in this venerable theater. Every evening, as the last patrons depart and the stage falls silent, I steel myself. Alone amidst the dormant equipment, I perform my tasks, rolling cables, checking connections, perpetually glancing over my shoulder, waiting for the hum, the whisper, the song. I have not ventured back into the basement's dusty embrace. The supply closet remains locked, its secrets undisturbed, but the presence lingers, a palpable weight on the edge of perception, beckoning me towards some unknown discovery, or perhaps towards surrender. I tell myself it's manageable, a trick of acoustics, an overwrought imagination. But the conviction remains. This is no technical fault. It is real. And each night, as the last one remaining, I feel the tension gather, muscles taut, anticipating the voice, and whatever it might demand next.